The GATT came into existence with effect on 1st January 1948 and remained in force till December 1994. What are the objectives of WTO? The first objective is to reduce tariffs and other trade barriers imposed by different countries. What are the benefits of WTO? So it helps promote international peace and facilitates international business. Hello everyone, I am Purnima, faculty in the Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. I welcome you all to this session. In this session, we will be having a discussion on the World Trade Organization. So as you all know, after the first two world wars, that is the First World War and the Second World War, there was a conference held at Bretton Woods, and because of that conference we had the establishment of three major international organizations, that is the IMF, and we also had the establishment of the IBRD, and now the establishment of the ITO, that is the International Trade Organization. Now, there was stiff resistance from the Americans for the establishment of the International Trade Organization, and because of this resistance, they thought that they should have an agreement between the countries so that they could have a free flow of international trade between countries. So, the result of this resistance for the establishment of the International Trade Organization, we got the GATT, that is the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. Now, let us have a look at what does this session tell us. So, the World Trade Organization and Major Agreement. Now, the GATT came into existence with effect on 1st January 1948 and remained in force till December 1994. Now, after the two world wars, so the Bretton Woods Conference, it was decided that they would establish the ITO. But the Americans resisted the establishment of ITO, and instead they favored a general agreement for trade and tariffs, so which came into existence on 1st January 1948 and which remained in force till December 1994. So the various rounds of negotiations have taken place under the auspices of GATT to reduce tariff and non-tariff barriers. Now, what do we mean by tariff and non-tariff barriers? So, whenever there is an international trade between two countries, now most of the countries, they include a tariff for the international trade. So, the tariff is a barrier for international trade, and this general GATT or the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, it fought for the reduction of tariffs and also reduction of barriers to trade. Then the last one was known as the Uruguay round, was the most important comprehensive one in terms of coverage of issues and also the lengthiest one from the point of view of the duration of negotiations, which lasted over a period of 7 years from 1986 to 1984. Now, there were a lot of talks between all the member countries, as a result of which one of the most important talks is known as the Uruguay round. So, this Uruguay round is the most comprehensive of all the talks held between the member countries, and it is one of the longest one, where it lasted for a period of 7 years from 1986 to 1994, and they had a coverage of almost all the issues which had come up during that time. Then, one of the key achievements of the Uruguay round of GATT negotiation was the decision to set up a permanent institution for looking after the promotion of free trade and fair trade amongst nations. Now, one of the key achievements of this Uruguay round is they sought the establishment of the permanent institution to look after the promotion of free and fair trade amongst the nations. So, this was one of the greatest achievements of GATT. Then, consequent to this decision, the GATT was transformed into World Trade Organization, with effect from 1st January 1995. The headquarters are situated at Geneva in Switzerland. So, the outcome of these talks were the establishment of the World Trade Organization with its head office in Geneva and Switzerland, and it came into force on 1st January 1995. Now, this GATT was transformed into the World Trade Organization. Then, the establishment of World Trade Organization represents the implementation of the original proposal of setting up the ITO as evolved amongst 5 decades back. So, the establishment of ITO represents the implementation of the International Trade Organization. So, actually they wanted to just establish the International Trade Organization, but in place of this International Trade Organization, they established the GATT, and after the GATT was dissolved, they just established this WTO, that is the World Trade Organization. This was a decision which was taken almost 50 years back by almost all the member nations. Now, let us look into what is this WTO. It is a permanent organization created by an international treaty ratified by the governments and legislatures of member states. So, WTO is a permanent organization. So, it is a permanent organization which looks for promotion of international trade amongst the countries. So, it is a permanent body which looks after the international trade, and it is an organization created by almost all the member nations, ratified by the legislatures of all the governments of all the nations. So, it is moreover a member-driven, rule-based organization in the sense that all decisions are taken by the member government on the basis of a general consensus. So, this is a member-driven and rule-based. So, why do we call it as a member-driven and rule-based? Because almost all the decisions taken in the World Trade Organization, they are all on the basis of consensus arrived at between the member nations, and almost all the rules are framed by all the members after reaching a general consensus. Then, as the principal international body concerned with solving trade problems between countries and providing a forum for multilateral trade negotiations, it has a global status similar to that of the IMF and the World Bank. So, the World Trade Organization is a permanent organization which is solving any trade problems between 2 countries. So, it is providing a forum for multilateral trade negotiations. So, whatever trade negotiations you can have between nations, it can be done through the WTO, and it has a global status. So, the WTO has been recognized as a world status, just we have recognized the IMF and the World Bank. Then, India is a founding member of the WTO. As on 11th December 2005, there were 149 members in the WTO. So, we know that India is also a member of the World Trade Organization, which has almost 149 members. Then, let us look into what are the objectives of WTO. The first objective is to reduce tariffs and other trade barriers imposed by different countries. In order to ensure that there is free flow of trade from between the nations, so the first objective of establishing the WTO is to reduce the tariff between the nations and also the trade barriers which were imposed between the nations. To engage in such activities which improve the standards of living, create employment, increase income and effective demand, and facilitate higher production and trade. So, the next objective of WTO is to improve the standard of living of the people, then increase the income and effective demand, and facilitate higher production and trade. So, these are the objectives of world trade. The next objective is to facilitate the optimum use of the world's resources for sustainable development. So, they sought to use the world's resources for development purposes and to promote integrated, viable and durable trading system. So, it wanted to promote an integrated and viable trading system among the member nations to ensure reduction of tariffs and other trade barriers imposed by different countries. Then it also sought to improve the standard of living and other facilitate higher trade activities between nations. Next, let us have a look into the functions of WTO. The major functions of WTO are promoting an environment that is encouraging to its member countries to come forward to WTO getting their grievances. So, this is one of the main functions of WTO. That is, it is encouraging the member countries to come forward to the WTO in mitigating any of their grievances relating to international trade. Then, the next function of WTO is laying down a commonly accepted code of conduct with a view to reducing trade barriers, including tariffs, and eliminating discrimination in international trade relations. So, the next function of the WTO is laying down a commonly accepted code of conduct with a view to reducing trade barriers. So, that is, they want to have a commonly accepted code of conduct by reducing trade barriers and also discriminating trade barriers also they wanted to abolish. Then, next function of WTO is ensuring that all rules, regulations prescribed in the Act are duly followed by the member countries for the settlement of their disputes. So, we all know that the World Trade Organization is a member-driven and rule-based form of organization, and almost all the rules are formed by the members with the general consensus. And as such, the rules and regulations prescribed should be followed by all the members for the settlement of their disputes. Then, the holding consultations with the IMF and the IBRD and its affiliated agencies so as to bring better understanding and cooperation in global economic policy making. So, whenever there is a global economic policy making, so this WTO will hold consultations with the IMF and the IBRD, which are the affiliated agencies to the World Trade Organization. So, why this is done? To have a better understanding and better cooperation in global policy making. Then, next function of WTO is supervising on a regular basis the operations of the revised agreements and ministerial declarations relating to goods, services, and trade-related intellectual property rights. Now, supervising on a regular basis the operations of the revised agreements. So, on a regular basis, they will be supervising the operations of the revised agreement and the ministerial declarations relating to goods, services, and trade-related IPR, that is the intellectual property rights. Then, next, what are the benefits of WTO? Since its inception in 1995, that WTO has come a long way in constituting legal and international foundation for the present day multilateral trading system. It has been instrumental not only in facilitating trade but also in improving the living standards. Cooperation among member countries are some of the benefits of WTO. So, if you look into the benefits of WTO, it has come a long way since its inception in 1995. So, it has laid the international foundation for the multilateral trading system between the nations, and it has also helped in increasing the standard of living of the member nations and also cooperation among the member nations. Now, what are the benefits of WTO? So, it helps promote international peace and facilitates international business. So, this is one of the major benefits of having the WTO, because it is promoting international peace. If international peace is there, and international trade will take place automatically. And all disputes between member nations are settled with mutual consultations. So, with the help of mutual consultations between the member states, so all disputes can be resolved with the help of the WTO. Then, rules make international trade and relations very smooth and predictable. So the rules which were framed by the WTO, it has made the trade relations smooth and predictable. Then free trade improves the living standard of people by increasing the income level. Now, since there is free trade between countries, the standard of living of the people can be increased and along with the income level, and it also provides ample scope for getting varieties of qualitative products. So people get variety of qualitative products because of the promotional practices of the WTO. Then economic growth has been fastened because of free trade. Now we can see that there is all around economic growth because of the free trade between nations, and the system encourages good government. The WTO helps fostering growth of developing countries by providing with that special and preferential treatments in trade related matters. Now, it is also helping the developing nations by giving them special and preferential treatment with relation to trade related matters, and it is promoting their international trade of developing countries. With this, we come to the end of this session on international business. Thank you.